He's three law firms on retainer. I don't know how much money is coming in, but I know that a lot of money is going out every single month for
The narrator begins by slowly pulling back the curtain on the financial and legal pressure surrounding Sean Diddy Combs, explaining that while the public once viewed him as an untouchable mogul, the reality now unfolding is far more fragile. We're told he has 3 separate law firms on retainer, each fighting different battles tied to criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and mounting investigations. The narrator emphasizes that even without exact numbers, the outflow of cash must be staggering. Millions are likely being burned each month just to maintain a legal defense strong enough to withstand federal scrutiny. What once looked like endless wealth now appears finite under the weight of court dates, attorney fees, and asset seizures. The video frames this as the beginning of vulnerability, not a dramatic collapse overnight, but a slow erosion. The narrator makes it clear that this financial strain sets the stage for everything that follows. Because when someone who built an empire on power and perception begins hemorrhaging resources, desperation can replace confidence. And desperation in high-stakes legal warfare often leads to explosive consequences. The narrator then shifts the focus directly to Duane Keefe D and the legal maneuver that threatens to detonate decades of silence. Facing life in prison for his alleged role in Tupac Shakur's 1996 Las Vegas murder, Davis is described as cornered but not defeated. Instead of pleading quietly or mounting a standard denial, he's preparing to subpoena Diddy himself to testify at trial. The narrator explains how this transforms the case from a singular homicide prosecution into something much larger, a potential conspiracy confrontation. Davis has long claimed that Diddy offered a $1 million bounty to eliminate Tupac and Suge Knight, an allegation reportedly captured during police interviews years ago. Now the defense's strategy is chillingly simple: force the alleged paymaster into the spotlight. If Diddy denies the claim under oath, Davis can argue that his earlier confession was fabricated, casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative. If Diddy refuses to testify, it fuels suspicion that there is something to hide. The narrator presents this as a trap with no clean exit, a calculated gamble where Davis risks nothing compared to what Diddy stands to lose.
The narrator explains that inside the Clark County courtroom, Davis's defense is not arguing innocence in the traditional sense. Instead, they are weaponizing the prosecution's hesitation. The video carefully walks viewers through the logic. If the state believes Davis's confession about the shooting is credible, then they must also investigate the person he claims financed it. Yet Diddy has never been charged as a co-conspirator in Tupac's death. That gap becomes the foundation of reasonable doubt. The narrator underscores how powerful that argument could be before a jury. If the alleged mastermind isn't facing indictment, why should the alleged shooter face life alone? It's portrayed as mutually assured destruction, Davis essentially telling prosecutors that if he falls, he's taking the narrative with him. The narrator stresses that this strategy is dangerous because it forces the state into a dilemma. Calling Diddy risks opening a Pandora's box of conspiracy theories and historical allegations. Ignoring him risks appearing selective or inconsistent. Either path carries consequences, and the defense knows it.
Action then turns to the infamous confession tape that has kept Davis incarcerated since 2023. The narrator describes how Davis allegedly detailed a meeting in a Los Angeles restaurant where Diddy offered $1 million to handle Tupac and Suge Knight. The specificity of the account, the location, the dollar figure, the alleged conversation gives it unsettling weight. But now Davis claims portions of those statements were exaggerated or fabricated, possibly made in pursuit of notoriety tied to his memoir. The narrator highlights the contradiction. Why would someone implicate a powerful mogul in a capital offense unless there was some truth behind it? Naming Diddy would not make Davis safer, it would make him a target. And yet he did it. The defense is now attempting to pivot, suggesting those earlier claims were part of a larger persona or bravado. The narrator frames this as a credibility war. If Diddy takes the stand, his own federal conviction could undermine his authority. If he doesn't, silence becomes suspicious. The jury ultimately may be left weighing two compromised narratives and deciding which one carries less deception.
The narrator expands on the timing, calling it catastrophic for Diddy, already serving a federal sentence after a conviction tied to transportation-related offenses. His empire is described as shrinking. Forbes estimates once placed his net worth in the hundreds of millions, but recent reports suggest sharp declines due to legal expenses and asset forfeiture threats. The narrator describes how business relationships have reportedly frayed, with management firms tightening control and legal teams allegedly struggling with delayed payments. The once polished image of the untouchable executive now contrasts with that of an inmate watching events unfold from behind bars. The video emphasizes that being drawn into a homicide conspiracy trial while simultaneously fighting financial and legal battles on other fronts magnifies the danger. It's not just about reputation anymore, it's about potential exposure. Every additional allegation compounds risk. And the narrator makes it clear that timing in legal warfare can be everything, and this timing could not be worse. The narrative then travels back to 1994, to the Quad Studios shooting in New York City, which Tupac survived, but publicly blamed on rivals. The narrator explains how that ambush planted the seeds of distrust that fueled the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Investigative reporting over the years has suggested that certain industry figures may have had prior knowledge of that attack, though no charges were filed. The video presents this history not as proven fact, but as lingering suspicion that never fully disappeared. The narrator argues that when viewed through this historical lens, Davis's allegations feel less isolated and more connected to a broader narrative of rivalry, power, and silence. The idea isn't that one incident proves another, but that patterns create perception, and perception, especially before a jury, can carry enormous weight. The past doesn't stay buried when new accusations surface. Instead, it resurfaces with sharper edges, reshaping how current claims are interpreted.
The narrator then addresses the death of the notorious B.I.G. in 1997, another drive-by shooting that remains officially unsolved. While no charges were ever brought against Diddy in connection to that tragedy, critics over the years have questioned decisions made around Biggie's travel to Los Angeles shortly after Tupac's death. The video does not present conclusions, but highlights how unresolved cases fuel suspicion. The narrator explains that when two icons fall in similar circumstances within months of each other, and both cases remain unsolved decades later, speculation becomes inevitable. Davis's current trial threatens to reopen those old wounds. If conspiracy theories are...
Finally, the narrator brings the story back to the present and the impossible position now facing Diddy. If he testifies and denies the bounty allegation, he may inadvertently strengthen Davis's argument that the state's case lacks corroboration. If he refuses, suspicion deepens. If prosecutors avoid calling him altogether, the defense can argue selective prosecution. Every path leads to exposure. The narrator emphasizes that this is no longer just about one defendant fighting for freedom. It's about whether decades of rumors will finally be tested under oath. With the trial potentially stretching into 2026 or beyond, the world is left waiting. Is Davis a desperate man spinning stories to save himself, or is he forcing a reckoning long avoided? The narrator closes by underscoring that the truth, whatever it may be, now sits at the intersection of power, silence, and survival. And when that courtroom door finally closes, one version of history may be rewritten.